Welcome everyone, this is John Corcoran, and really excited today to have with us Andrew Warner. Welcome, Andrew.
Hey, thanks for having me here.
So excited to talk to you. I'll have to admit, I'm a little bit nervous doing an interview of Andrew Warner, who has interviewed over 700 different entrepreneurs and business owners and celebrities. And, I feel a little bit like I'm giving stock picking tips to Warren Buffett or something like that. So I'll do my best. So let's kind of jump right in. So we're going to get into asking you a little bit about your background as an entrepreneur. But one big thing that really stood out for me was this story of this $1 billion contest that you did a couple of years ago as part of your company, Bradford and Reed. So tell me about the origin of that, how you came up with that crazy idea, and how it resulted.
Yeah, we said that we offered people a lottery with 77 numbers that they could possibly pick. They picked their lucky 7 numbers, and if our computer system actually picked the same 7 numbers as they did, they would win $1 billion jackpot. And just offering $1 billion jackpot got us a huge amount of attention. I got to be on Good Morning America, USA Today covered it, a bunch of websites covered it, newspapers all over the world, including one in Russia that my Russian friend said his parents read.
You've made it.
That's right, exactly. Once you hit the Russian press, you know you made it big, right? And you know what? The idea came to me when my brother and I were walking through a conference, and we discovered that you don't actually have to pay off a jackpot yourself if somebody wins. You just have to buy insurance per entry, and if a person wins, the insurance company pays it off.
So I imagine as more people entered, your premium went up on that insurance?
Same amount. What they did was
okay.
they said, what's our risk per entry? And we'll just charge Andrew per entry plus, a nice fat profit for themselves. No one else had done before. And in fact, this insurance is called SCA Promotions. You'll start to see their names in all kinds of contests, like the free throw shot at a basketball game. If someone from the stands makes that shot from half court, I should say, and they win $1 million, it's usually SCA that backs those kinds of contests. So we did it. It got us a ton of attention, got us a ton of members. Unfortunately, nobody won. I wanted a winner because I didn't have to pay the money. The insurance company did not want a winner. They ended up being a big win because no one in our audience guessed the right 7 numbers.
Well, that eliminates my next question, which was, what did you do with the $1 billion? So I guess there wasn't any. Andrew, it looks like we're a little frozen here.
There we go. Can you hear me?
Yeah, better. We'll just edit that out. So
the reason that we did it, of course, was we paid a price per entry. Every time someone entered, we asked them for their name, we asked them for their email address, we asked them for their home address, we asked them for permission to email them, and then we offered them a few lead-based offers like sign up for Time Magazine, etc. So we knew how much we were paying per entry to the insurance company. We knew how much companies like Time Magazine were paying us every time one of our members signed up to their magazines, and we knew where the business model was.
Okay, so 2 questions which you can answer or decline to answer if you so like. One is, what was the ROI on that? Did it pay off?
It did pay off from what I remember, but not nearly as much as it should have. What happened was we lined up all these sponsors who were supposed to pay us per entry, and then there was a meltdown in the tech industry where a lot of our guys went out of business or they were going out of business. And even though we had them signed to a contract, if they just literally could not afford to pay, then there was no way to get them to live up to that contract. And so that was an issue. The other thing that I felt was a failure for me was that my plan was to build up this asset by getting millions of registered members onto the site and then get them to keep playing and so on, and then maybe spin it off as its own business, maybe even sell it as its own business. And we did get 3 million members within 3 months, which is unheard of. 3 million members who gave us their real names because they wanted to make sure that if they won, the check was signed over to their real names, their real addresses because they wanted to make sure the check was sent to them properly, their real email addresses so they'd know where to be alerted if they won. 3 million solid members. But the valuations for internet companies started to go down at that point because of the meltdown. And so that was painful. Asset, it was good, but it wasn't nearly as great as I imagined it would be because of outside factors. And that's painful. That something outside of my control could influence my results so much is sucky.
So let's reflect on that a little bit before I get back into the origins of how you became an entrepreneur. But how did that experience with that contest, building that business, how has that affected you going forward?
It taught me that it's not all my own personal willpower. Up until that point, I felt that whatever I wanted out of life, I could just will. I could will this conversation to go my way. I could will you to do what I want. Not necessarily by pushing you aggressively, but by just wanting it bad enough. More than the next, you'll pick up on my vibes that I want this. That you'll just say, I can't fight it. This guy's just going there. I'm going to go along with it. And I realized, well, there's some issues there's some things that I can control that way. And we invested millions of dollars in this contest. I mean, it costs a lot of money to buy those entries. It costs a lot of money to build a site, to get the promotion team in place. And I learned that in the future, if I was going to invest that much money, I've got to understand that willpower is not enough.
Well, there were a lot of people who were caught flat-footed around that time period. This was, when exactly when's the contest? Was it 2009 or so?
2009, 2000, somewhere.
Yeah. Well, I want to take a few steps backwards. I think from that answer that you just gave, you kind of demonstrated that you really had being an entrepreneur within you. But what age did you realize that this was for me, starting new companies and investing in companies and not going to work for someone else?
Oh, as far back as I remember. I don't know that I specifically said don't go to work for someone else, but there is a certain entrepreneurial creativity that I felt, and that I actually feel a lot of other people feel. Where as a kid, I bought these sticks of gum for 50 cents, and there were 10 sticks of gum, and I sold each one for 10 cents a piece, and I doubled my money. And more than just making money, I got to just feel commerce. I got to feel that I could sell. I got to feel the mechanics of entrepreneurship. And I feel that there are a lot of us who've had these moments in our lives where we were creative entrepreneurially, and we expressed it. But as kids, we weren't encouraged to continue to express it. As kids, we were told, don't do it. My little business was shut down quickly by my elementary school teachers. I've talked about this on Mixergy and heard other entrepreneurs say that similar things happened to them. One person who stands out in my mind is the founder of StubHub. Ends up building this multi-million-dollar company, sells to eBay. Clearly, he did good things with entrepreneurship, but as a kid, when he expressed it, he was shut down. And I feel that we need to encourage more people to express that entrepreneurial creativity. If someone sat down and drew in school, we might tell them, well, don't draw while you're paying attention to the teacher, but do continue to draw. We'll actually offer you a class that will teach you how to draw. But if they were to try to, express their entrepreneurial creativity, they get shut down.
It's really unfortunate that it works that way. So your early expression of your entrepreneurial creativity was shortly after graduating from NYU. You and your brother went into business together, and you formed Bradford and Reed, which was your original business. So, first of all, your last name's Warner, and there's kind of a funny story about how Bradford and Reed got its name. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, the Bradford and Reed name came from me and my brother looking through a book of American and British last names. What we were looking for was a name that sounded so impressive that if I called up a prospect to sell them, they'd say, well, I don't want to, this guy could be important. He could be a lawyer who has an issue with us. Let's take it. It could be a venture capital firm or investment firm. Let's just take it and figure out what it is. And if I called from so-and-so.com, they might not take it seriously. They might say, I don't know this company, another.com, screw it, let's send them to voicemail. But if I called up from Bradford and Reed, boom, I get right through and I have an opportunity to sell, and I could sell.
I think Tim Ferriss has a story in his book about rather than calling yourself president or CEO of your company, you should do vice president because no one who has a one-person operation calls themselves vice president.
Yeah.
It's a great idea. How is it working with your brother? I'm curious because, I'm a lawyer and there's a lot of family disputes that end up in litigation for unfortunate reasons. So a lot of times family partnerships don't go so well. But how did that work out?
Beautifully. And the reason it worked out so well is because he and I are so rational and we're so determined that if you're absolutely determined to build a successful company, and we were, and frankly, I was really hungry for money at the time, nothing else matters. I would sacrifice everything to be able to make it work, and I knew that he had the chops to get me to where I wanted to be, and I couldn't sacrifice that. I would do whatever it took. I would deal with any frustrations. I would get over them quickly. I would bring myself back to reality and rational thought just to get to what I wanted.
So you guys did a lot of different things. You did the Grab.com $1 billion contest, and you had electronic greeting cards, which was another really profitable area of your company as well. What else did you do not so well, looking back on that period?
Ooh, great question. Here's what we did we did a lot of things not so well. What happened was we had this great mailing list of 20,000 people who gave us their email addresses. And that allowed us to experiment with new products that we would then email to these 20 million people, excuse me. So 20 million people to send to a new contest site, fantastic. 20 million people to send to a greeting card site, fantastic. Here's where it didn't work so well. We saw hotornot.com doing well, where people would see a picture of a guy or a girl, they would rate them, and just keep going all day with rating and viewing other people's ratings. So we came up with our own version of that. I forget what it was called, but we said we can't do ratings. They already did it. Let's just do who is the hotter of the two. We show you two pictures. You pick the one who's the hotter of the two, and we just give you a rating for each one generated by what everyone else thought in these little battles. Total failure. It didn't work. There was no business model behind it. We were just trying to copy someone who was successful. There was no love for it. You need to coddle a business for a while. You need to really think about the mechanics of it in order to get it to work. It's not enough to just say it works for him and I have this audience. I'll just copy it.
Interesting. So eventually you were working with Bradford and Reed and you were working really long hours and you kind of burnt out of that experience, and so you took some time off to relax. Tell me about how you got to that point of deciding that you needed to take some time off and what you did during that time period.
I needed to take time off because I did not ever rest. I didn't have any outside interests. You mentioned Tim Ferriss. When I interviewed Tim Ferriss, he talked about the need to exercise as an entrepreneur. And Y Combinator, too, says that that's one of the important things that they want the entrepreneurs they invest in to do, to go and exercise. And I used to just laugh at that. Why do you need to exercise? What, are you going to be a meathead? Go and work. Exercising is for people who are too stupid to work. Work all day long because you want to keep building. If you have anything else in your life that you're more interested in than work, even for a few minutes, it means you don't love your work enough. Then improve it so that you love it more than whatever else could take up your time. But what I found is that when work suffers, if that's all you have in your life, then your whole life suffers. And when your whole life suffers, then you start to doubt yourself. You start to lose excitement and motivation for life. And so anyway, we talked about how the internet bubble burst and my customers started going out of business. It started to weigh on me. It started to weigh on me so much that I felt like everything in my life was going badly. And frankly, everything in my life was going badly because all I had was this. And so that's why I got burned out. And that's why now I run. That's why I try to have outside interests so that when work stinks, I could still feel like, hey, you know what? I just did a 20-mile run on my own this Sunday. I'm feeling like I could conquer anything. I don't care if work stinks. I'm going to make it better because I'm a guy who ran 20 miles in this new neighborhood on my own,
And did all that come from that time period that you took off after selling Bradford and Reed?
I had to actually learn to be interested in other things. I had to learn how to have conversations with people because I didn't know how to have a conversation with someone that didn't involve me getting to a goal, selling to them, or convincing them to work with me or whatever. So I actually went into therapy. I explored outside interests. I pushed myself to talk to people. And what I did was, frankly, I just completely disconnected. I didn't work at all for years. I think it was 3 years maybe. I don't know. For years, just no work at all. Just having a good time, going out every night, reading the paper, cover to cover, the Wall Street Journal, every article that they put out that day I wanted to read. I traveled through Europe where I got to just wake up every morning and say, what do I feel like doing today? Should I just go explore the city or hop on a train and go to another city, or do I want to go back home? That was a really good life.
Yeah, but I imagine at some point you knew that you'd go back to working and driving. No.
And in my mind, I said, this is cool. I'm never going to work again. Ever hunger I had for some reason is satiated, or I'm over it, or I'm too burned out. I just was never going to work again. Literally.
Okay, so something must have changed. So what was it what did you just wake up one day and say, I want to try something else?
Yeah, I think at some point I just got over it. I said, I need something a little more meaningful. Well, I always wanted to do this thing that Dale Carnegie did, or that Andrew Carnegie did, by funding Napoleon Hill's education or study of successful people. So I always wanted to be able to do that. I could do whatever I want now. Let's go do that.
So before we get into talking about your current project, Mixergy, which you're really well known for, I wanted to talk a little bit about just entrepreneurship in general. And particularly, I spoke to a class the other day of new entrepreneurs. These are people who had relatively new companies or were starting new companies. And one of the major questions that they had was confusion. Really, they knew how to cook Mexican food, or they knew how to make juice, or whatever it was they wanted to do, fashions. But they had questions about the process of starting a business, whether it was correct legal entity or business license or forming a DBA. And I'm just wondering, how in your early 20s was that not a barrier to you? How did you just blow past those sorts of things, all the many different barriers that you have at just starting a business?
Because none of it seemed like a barrier. Because I studied other people who've gotten through it, and I realized that the kind of company that the legal entity that you pick is important, but it's not what you should be spending the most time on. The business card is important, but it's not what you should be spending the most time on. The company name is important, but it's not what you should be spending the most time on. It's, in my mind back then, it was just finding a model that worked and just trying it and seeing if you can make it work the way you imagine it would. The first thing we did was email newsletters, and it worked well, but not spectacular. It wasn't going to be the multi-billion-dollar, multi-million-dollar vision that I had for myself. And so I adjusted and adjusted and adjusted.
And during this time period, while you were building Bradford and Reed, you mentioned leaders like Warren Buffett, and you mentioned the Carnegies as being inspirations to you. This is kind of a two-part question, but who were your icons during that time period? And also, was there any direct mentors that you had that you could turn to while you were building that business other than your brother?
No, I should have had some direct mentors. I should have asked my college entrepreneurship professor to help me out, to talk to me every once in a while. I think the same thing that drove me to succeed is what made me think that no one would want to be my mentor. I was driven to succeed because I felt like an outsider. Like, all these people didn't value me. Like, the rest of the world didn't care about who I was. And I was going to show them by making so much money and building such a successful company that they had to pay attention. And as much as it was an entrepreneurial need to be creative, it was also a need to prove myself that way that kept driving me. And if you feel like you have to show everyone else that you're valuable by building a successful company, it's natural also to feel I'm not valuable enough for anyone to want to mentor me, for anyone to want to spend time with me.
That's an interesting juxtaposition.
Sorry?
That's an interesting conflict there.
Yeah. And what I ended up doing instead was I went to books. I went to audio programs to just learn from other people. And when you see people who want it, who build it, who make it happen, if you study how they do it, you start to see some patterns. You start to see that it's okay to do things that other people think is not okay to do. I talk about this a lot. Ted Turner was a big hero of mine, And when I hear about Ted Turner going to John Malone's office, who owned Ted Turner, of course, the guy behind TBS and CNN and Cartoon Network and so on, when he goes into John Malone's office, who ran one of the major cable companies, and kisses his shoes and says, "Please run me," like as if he's doing shtick, but he's coming into the office and doing something you're not supposed to do in a business setting because he's so determined to make it work. You start to think, hey, you know what? Those rules that you're supposed to follow as an entrepreneur, as a business person, they don't apply if you're a real entrepreneur. Do whatever you want. It's okay to want it badly. It's okay to try something brand new, to be shticky, to push. And so that was a huge influence on me. One of the things that I did that helped me a lot was I wanted to work with this woman, Rosalind Resnick. She represented big email mailing lists, and she sold ads in them. But the most credible and the biggest, she didn't want to deal with these petty guys who were just, spam. Obviously, no spam. She was a big anti-spam speaker. But also, she didn't want to deal with the petty stuff. And I was petty. I was small. I was tiny when I wanted to work with her, but I needed her revenue, and I wanted to grow with her. And her company wouldn't work with me. So I took a check for all the money that my brother and I had in the bank at the time, $2,000. I drove to her office, and she wasn't there, but the first person I saw who I talked to on the phone, I said, "Here's a check for $2,000. Sell my ads for a little time. And if you don't make enough money on me to make it worth your while, if you don't believe that I'm going someplace that you want to come along to, cash this $2,000 check, and you'll be able to profit from this relationship, at least financially." And at that point, they said, "Okay, I'll think about it." I couldn't believe that the guy didn't say absolutely and jump on it, but, I guess he didn't have the authority to. But word quickly got to Rosalind. She came into the office. She heard about the guy who did it. She took the check and me into her office. She talked to me, and she said, "Okay, we'll sign you." She saw that anyone who's willing to do that is someone she wants to work with. And that's not the kind of thing you're supposed to do. You're not supposed to just march into someone's office unannounced. You're not supposed to say, "You have to work with me. I'm going to pay you," when they're supposed to pay you. When they're supposed to pay you, you're not supposed to pay them. But anyway, there are no rules. Make the rules yourself. Beyond the legal rules, there are no rules.
That leads me to another question. Do you think that starting this new challenge of launching Mixergy, where you've interviewed some really big names, people who, at least early on, didn't know who you were, do you think that became an equivalent challenge for you? Whereas with Bradford and Reed, you'd obviously done really well, but the access to interviews to these big celebrities, big names, became a similar challenge as you had to breaking through with this woman, Rosalind.
Not really. Getting people to say yes to interviews is so much easier than people imagine. I'll tell you why it's easy, because if you're willing to talk to enough people, and if you're willing to talk to not be defined by your failure, to not be defined by no, it's easy to get a yes. For interviews, there are people right now who are dying to be interviewed by anyone. And I'm not just talking about nobodies. I'm saying that there's a successful person who we all admire right now. I don't know the name, but at any given point there is, who is now on a book tour, or who is now launching, or is now just looking for Google hits, or is now just looking for experience doing interviews or being on camera or just testing his equipment. Who will say yes to doing an interview? There's someone right now who will partner with anybody. There's someone right now who will buy from anyone. You just need to, think about where those people are and how do I get to them, and ask them, and be willing to accept no and come back and ask someone else or ask that person again in the future. The big challenge for me now, that's the equivalent of making a killing, like that was the vision that I had for Bradford and Reed, is to bring some meaning to all these interviews. I can't be the guy who dies being another Larry King. Congratulations to Larry King on building such a successful career, interviewing people and really making news through his interviews, and shaping politics through some of his interviews. But that's not my vision for myself. I don't want to just help other people communicate their message. I want to draw some meaning from all these hundreds of interviews that I've done, and do it in a way that then allows other people to live better lives because of it.
Okay, and is that what is the answer to that? Is it the premium subscription?
I think I finally hit one. Here's something that I'm noticing now more and more, and I can see why people do this. My audience has heard me say this. This process of finding the pain. Entrepreneurs who don't just want luck into success, who don't have the luxury to buy their way to success, They talk to customers, they find their customers' pain, and then they say, if I solve that for you, would you be willing to pay me for it? If they found a pain that's painful enough, that's significant enough for someone in someone's life, they will get a hell yes. And of course, payment once that solution is built. And it doesn't even, the surprising thing, it doesn't even have to be a perfect solution. If you could just, if it's a big enough pain and you could take away even 1%, let alone 10% or 50% or 51%, if it's a significant enough pain, any amount of pain relief that you can offer is going to be helpful, and people are going to appreciate it and pay for it.
And so that's your mission.
People will actually pay just to have you understand the pain. There's this great book, I forget the author's name, but it's about manic depression. The book is called An Unquiet Mind. And the woman there says, she talks about how crazy her life was both in the manic and the depressive points. But she says what she really needed from a therapist wasn't the answers. She just wanted to be heard. That alone provided relief. And I feel the same thing is true even for people who have business issues, like I don't even know how to hire an employee, or I'm intimidated by my CFO because he's older than me, or I don't know how to talk to customers, or I don't know how to talk to male customers or women customers. If you could just understand their pain enough that makes them feel heard, it's like relief.
Great lesson. You've mentioned books a couple times, and I'm a little thrown off here because it's like you're missing your trademark hat or something. There's usually the stack of books over your right shoulder there. I'm wondering, what have you read lately? What would you recommend?
In the early days, there was literally just bookcases all along the wall behind me, completely covered, and probably some on the floor. I love reading books. I just moved to this new office, and what I'm finding is I don't read paper books so much anymore, and I do want to have as clutter-free a life as possible, so I'm not buying books just for props, and if I'm reading really, then I can't display them. But what I'm reading right now, what was it that I just read? I just read a story about the founding of Pixar, and for some reason I can't think of the author's name, even though it was tremendous and it helped me interview the co-founder of Pixar. To read just stories of how a company's founded. You could get lost in those stories and draw your own meanings from them. To me, it's as much fun as nonfiction. And then the other book that I'm reading as much fun as fiction. The other book that I'm reading that's nonfiction is Mastery by Robert Greene, the guy who wrote Power. This guy just takes a topic like how to get power, and he breaks it down into components of how it's been done throughout the ages, and then he tells you stories of how people have done it throughout the ages. I love it.
Oh, that sounds great. I want to move to talking about Mixergy because we don't want to gloss over that. So tell me what the origin was of Mixergy, because I know that the original goal behind it, the original idea behind it was not a success. So tell me a little bit about that.
Okay, and I should say before we even get into that one thing that I don't want to brush over, and I feel like because the economy is kind of bad, we don't talk about success much. We don't talk about the fruits of it. But I should say that I call my audience freedom fighters because when I ask my entrepreneurs who I interview why they do it, they say because they want freedom. And if you take a look at what I got at the end of Bradford and Reed, I got so many things, but one of the best advantages is freedom. Freedom to do nothing if I wanted to. Freedom to read all day if I wanted to. Freedom to start a company that was a dream of mine if I wanted to. We are going through so much pain as entrepreneurs, rejection, embarrassment. You publish to your Facebook profile what you're about to launch, and your friends from elementary school see it, and they judge you, and they're critical of you, and your frenemies see it because, everything spreads, and your frenemies are watching you, and it's embarrassing when you do sometimes fail in public like that with those people who are waiting for you to fail. It's embarrassing when, as one entrepreneur told me, he went into a grocery store and he put his credit card down and there was no money in his credit card. There are times when this stuff happens and it's painful, like you wouldn't, but like most people wouldn't want to subject themselves to this kind of pain. And we do as entrepreneurs. And the benefit of it is, well, there's benefit to our customers because their lives are better. Because if we've found their pain and we've solved 1%, we've made their lives better, measurably better. But there's also benefit to us, the freedom to be able to do whatever we want. You just can't, you can't understate that. we grow up with this idea that we have to listen to our parents, and then to listen to our teachers, and then eventually listen to our bosses, and then eventually listen to everybody. But to really get freedom it's priceless, and it's worth the battle. And it's great that we're helping everyone else, but I want to also say that what we get for ourselves shouldn't be undervalued. And there will be a time when the economy does better and people start bragging about all the things that they want. It'll be okay to talk about the rewards of our labor. And at that point, maybe it'll be more acceptable to say, yeah, there's something in it for us, which is freedom. But maybe even then, it'll be obscured by people talking about the Rollses that they drive or the Teslas that they drive. I just want to emphasize now and for always that the benefits of freedom, the benefits of creating something that changes people's lives and ours is so worth all that.
And that's a great entry point into the founding of Mixergy, because that's where you were.
And you and I, before we started recording this interview, talked about Howard Dean's campaign. And I watched Howard Dean, this guy who was basically a nobody, governor from Vermont, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Sorry?
That's right, yeah.
Vermont, just like nobody, he starts to build a bigger war chest than anyone else. Starts to get these people who meet up throughout the country. More than anyone else, he's getting passion, he's getting excitement. And what does he do to generate this? Well, he uses the web, and one thing that he does with the web is get people to meet up in person. And I thought, okay, this is the way to start a movement. Get people to meet up in person. They help shape the movement, and then they help add a megaphone to the movement. And so I started creating these in-person meetings. And then they got bigger, and more people came. And the one bad mistake that I made was I never told people what the meaning was, what the purpose was of those meetings. I was too embarrassed to stand up and say, hey, what I'd like you guys to do is to understand that we can build great businesses, that we should help each other do it, that we can discover newer ways to build businesses together. I didn't say anything about it. I just said, let's get together and good things will happen. I was too embarrassed to say, I don't yet have the answer, and I'd like you still to know that this is where I'm driving to, because I was proud. I said, I'm the guy who succeeds. I'm the guy who knows everything. Instead of adding meaning, instead of standing up and over saying, this is what I'm trying to do and I'm not there yet, but I want to create groups that will eventually be big, where entrepreneurs will help each other, I said, let's build software that will help it. And then I got deep into building software, and I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars building software. And then since I've spent my own money building software for my own group, I said, well, I need to recoup some of this money, or else I'm an idiot, who wasted money. The way to recoup that money is to now create a web app. Let's call it an invitation web app that anyone else gets to use. And then I'll build the business off of that. And I completely got diverted from my mission. All because instead of standing up and saying what I wanted, I just did what I thought I was supposed to do. Big, stupid mistake. And that was the first version of Mixergy. It's called Mixergy because I was creating these mixers, and they had this energy about them, and it was going to be Mixergy, this word that I could trademark. Anyway,
it's still a good word.
I think there's something to it. I think it could work. Even if I figured out how to make it work today, I should stay away from it.
Well, it obviously works now. It's just a different incarnation. So at what point did you pivot from in-person meetings to essentially a web interview show now?
Well, the big turning point came when I admitted failure publicly. I said I failed. And I think about all these entrepreneurs who I ask to do interviews about their failures, who are too embarrassed to even admit that they failed to themselves, let alone to my audience or to their own customers. I'm so glad I said I failed. I said it publicly. You can go to my site and search for I failed and see it on Mixergy.com today. And it was a huge turning point for me, because by saying I failed, I didn't have to put up the pretense that this was a success, and pretend that it was a success and pretend that everything worked out okay. I got to say I failed, and then I got to say I need to make this work. And then I got to be open about what I was trying to do. And when you're vulnerable and are open about what you're trying to do, people can relate to it and they want to help, or at least they could understand it. They didn't understand what those groups were that I was doing. But when I did, I failed video posts. I actually looked at the camera and said to anyone who came to my site, I failed. I said, what I'd like to do is learn why I failed and learn from other people why they succeed. And that's what I'm going to dedicate my life to. And I'm going to do it by interviewing. And I did. And the audience got to see me struggle to learn what mistake I made and to figure out how I could have done it better. And they got to follow along and watch it.
That's really interesting. Yeah. And eventually you kind of evolved a little bit and moved beyond just the straight interviews and also doing courses. Tell me a little bit more about the other offerings that Mixergy has now.
The courses came from me saying, I'm not going to spend any more money on Mixergy. It has to survive on its own or fail on its own. But if I'm going to be that fool who just keeps spending hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars on his own product that nobody else cares about, then I've got a hobby that isn't changing the world. And so I started getting some ad revenue, and that did okay. And then I said, I'd like to get some real revenue. And plus, I don't think people respect anything that's free. They respect what they pay for. And that's a good indication that I'm doing something right if people are willing to pay for it. So I started selling stuff on the site, my own stuff. And it didn't go so well. I'd sell something like a collection of, I don't even know what, but I don't remember anymore. But I would sell something and it didn't work well, and then I'd be embarrassed that it didn't work well, or wondering why it didn't work well, and I would take too long to figure out why it didn't work well and how to do it better next time. And then I finally said, hey, you know what? One of the reasons why my interviews worked and I got better as an interviewer is I committed to a schedule of every freaking day doing an interview. And that got me better, and it kept me from hiding from my setbacks, and it got me to learn and then apply what I learned instantly, not wait a month to apply it and hope that I remember. But if I asked the wrong question, the next time I had an opportunity to do an interview was the next day, and I could fix that by asking a better question next time. And so I said I need to set up the same kind of schedule for selling things. And if you do a search on my site right now for Testing Tuesdays, you'll see a post that I did where I said, I don't know what to sell you guys, but I think it's important for me to sell. And so I'll do Testing Tuesdays, where every Tuesday I'll try to sell you something. And if you like, if you don't. And of course, if you buy it and you're unhappy with it, give me a refund. I'll give you a refund. I mean, it's all good data for me. I'm just trying to figure out what works.
And did you create these products, or you were affiliate for these other products?
I wanted to create it because my goal wasn't to generate revenue for the sake of generating revenue. It was to improve the products that I created, to improve its utility to my audience. And so I created a collection of ebooks that I hired a writer to create based on my interviews. I did live webinars. I did all kinds of stuff. And then eventually it evolved into courses where entrepreneurs come and they teach a topic that they're good at. And even that evolved. The way that we do it evolved.
Great. I want to wrap this up because we've taken a lot of time here. But before
I'm sorry to interrupt, but
okay.
The big message there is, to me and to anyone who's listening, is anything you want to do really well, set up a schedule where you're forced to do it over and over and over with no outs. I've talked about this too, about my dating. I didn't know how to date in the Bradford and Reed days. When I wanted to learn how to date, I said, I'm going to California, to Southern California at that point, and I'm going to go out 6 out of 7 nights, and every night that I go out, I'm going to talk to 5 groups of girls, or 5 girls, and I'm going to do it over and over so I could fail and learn and improve and not hide from it, and over I did it. And I actually would even put up a post on Craigslist saying, I'm looking for a wingman, somebody to just go out with me. And that held me even more accountable when I told them that what we're doing for the night is talking to 5 groups of girls. Whatever it is that you want to get better at, if you force yourself to do it over and over and over again, you will learn to get better. You will stop hiding from your failures and instead just look for ways to repair them. The fact that you know that you're going to have to do this again tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day is going to force you to say, what do I do to get better at this? Because I can't keep sucking.
That's a great lesson. And the last question I did want to ask about, which is related to the message that you were just sharing, which was your interview technique. And you mentioned that you've gotten better over the years. I think you do a tremendous job on Mixergy of conducting your interviews. But who has inspired you? Is there anyone that you've modeled your interviews after, or your interviewing technique after?
The only person who I've modeled myself after is Charlie Rose. You don't, at the end of a Charlie Rose interview, say, boy, that Charlie Rose is a great guy. You say, oh, I get that guy. I get the guy who we interviewed. I understand him. And that's what I want in my interviews. And people tell me that I should express my personality more, and I'm working on it. But at the heart of it, it has to be you, the listener, understanding the real story of the entrepreneur, not me manipulating that entrepreneur story to fit my narrative or to fit my need to sell you on a message, but the truth of how he really or she really built their business.
Great, Andrew. I've taken a lot of your time, and I just want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us and share a bit of your experiences. And so tell us, where can people learn some more about you?
Well, they could cyberstalk me, and I'm sure they will, by just typing Andrew Warner into Google.
Although it was interesting to learn about some of the other Andrew Warners out there, former professional wrestler.
Meet him. I got to get a Wikipedia page so that I meet him and will find me before they find him.
Yeah.
I always say that find a way when you listen to somebody online to not just be a passive listener, but to find a way to connect with them. And I actually watch relationships being built with my interviewees by people of the guts to say, hey, I saw you on Mixergy, thanks. And I'm totally inaccessible. I mean, my email address is out there, but I'm not checking email because I get flooded with email. But there's so many ways to reach me still, like Twitter, live in-person events that I do for drinks. Find a way, whether it's me or someone else who you've heard or whose work you read, to connect with them and say, hi, I saw you there. Because the connection, even with someone like me who pushes away email, who doesn't make himself excessively open, it's an incredible way to connect. I'm now insecure about the way that I'm saying this. If someone at the end of this says, I saw you, it worked out great, or I like this one piece, you'll just be reassuring me and making me feel great. And as a result of you making me feel great, I will then want to make you feel great or want to do great things for you. Which isn't to say, hey, do this for me, make me feel good, but to just take that away, I think, from any... Boy, I'm rambling here at the end. But anyway, I always want to leave that as a message for my audience at the end of interviews, and so I figured I'd also squeeze it to your interview. Connect with the person who you watch. You are not just a passive viewer like watching Spider-Man on the movie theater. You are an entrepreneur. You're someone who's leaving a legacy, or someone who's trying to interact with this world, not passively watch it. And if there's someone whose message you heard or you read and you connected with it anyway, find a way to talk to them in person or talk to them on social media or connect with them beyond just being a passive viewer. And I hope you do it with me, is what I'm saying.
So what you're saying is, please cyberstalk me.
Please cyberstalk me and say hi.
and now we will share Andrew's home phone number. No, I don't think we'll do that. Well, great, Andrew. I really appreciate you taking the time, and good luck to you.
You bet. Thanks, man.